and welcome back to
Hey,
Aural Mess. This is our third episode. I'm joined today by recording artist Carly Shea. Hi, Carly.
hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and we'll jump in from there.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Carly Shea. I am a New York City-based recording artist, kind of delving in between the world of pop, like R&B sort of space. And yeah, I've been releasing records pretty inconsistently, but my most recent record, Problems, is out, and I'm putting out a lot more this year. And when I'm not working on tunes, I work as a modeling agent. So that's kind of my like day life, night life in a nutshell. Yeah.
Super cool. Yeah, I saw. I mean, obviously, I got to know your music after we connected on Instagram, and I love your song "Problems." By the
Thank
way, it's
you.
on my current playlist,
Oh,
and
nice.
the video is really cool. Why don't you tell me about filming the video and sort of the concept? I mean, I kind of get it, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, so Problems was a song that I had recorded like quite a long time ago. So at the time I was working kind of more on, I would say, like pop space. The stuff I was writing wasn't really coming from me, and I decided to kind of write more of the sound that I listened to. And Problems, I guess, was more R&B leaning, and the video was probably like the first bigger production video that I was able to do. I had linked up with a director who wants to be anonymous, but he basically created this treatment in advance. So the whole concept, spoiler alert, is it's about the problems and the internal conflict and how they come to get you. So, you know, you can go ahead and watch it, but there's a plot twist at the end that kind of encompasses how, a lot of the times you think the problems are external, but they're really internal. So the video we shot, a lot of it was on the low. Can't say we had permits for everything, but we lent a car and we were driving in Brooklyn, and they did like a crazy job of rigging this car up with this camera. Like they had these like it was kind of makeshift suction cups so we could film the front of the car so we could catch the action between me and the shadow driver. And then they had a gimbal in the center of the car, so there were some tricky shots we had to get. Most notably, there is a scene at the end where there's a car crash and I have to run out of the car. And this was done on one take because the way it was shot was I had to run out. The camera didn't capture me running, of course, and then I had to be in the driver's seat. So it looked as though I was both the passenger and the driver, which we did like 10 takes of, and it was excruciatingly cold out, and I was wearing a crop top, and it hurt a lot, but they say art hurts, so that's what happened. Yeah, and yeah, that was pretty much the process.
Yeah, oh, that's great, and I think that the mood of the video kind of fits the vibe of the song, so it's great. Just and I'll link it in the show
Thank
notes when
you.
we're done. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about how you approach writing songs. I know you said you've been inconsistent, and you've got
Yeah.
some stuff coming in. So when and how do you get inspired to write? And I guess what sort of things do you what sort of things inspire you? I guess, and how do you go about getting those from your brain into the microphone?
I feel like it's usually when I'm sitting in my apartment at like 1 in the morning and I'm just like, I got a lot on my mind, Or if I make myself sit down and try to write, sometimes I'll listen to tracks over and over and over again to kind of find the stem or like the notes where I'm resonating with the music, and I'll kind of go from there. I find it easier to kind of just write in the moment, which means that my inspiration is a bit more sporadic because I don't always feel inspired. It's tough. Like I'm not a full time musician, so to be creatively inspired, I think you really need to push yourself to have different experiences and be able to bring those to your writing. So for me, like unless I'm going through something big, like I have to really push myself to listen to songs that will create melody and lyric ideas in my head. I mean, on occasion, like I've had specific situations and scenarios, like with problems. I was going through a bit of a, let's call it a situationship, where it ended in a way where I needed to write. It was therapy. And I think a lot of the upcoming songs I'm going to be releasing are in that realm. Like it's therapeutic to write music. That's really the number one for me. I find that my music tends to be a little bit heavier and not like party club music, just because I find it hard getting into that character space of, I'm not like a big like party girl. Like that's just not my life, but I'm a very like emotional, heavy person. So I feel like when I can put that in a song, it can sometimes close an emotional chapter for me. I know that sounded really dramatic, but that's kind of what what the process is like. And then there's the technicalities of working with different producers and the back and forth of that. I mean, I do a little bit of basic production myself, but I've been very lucky to be connected with some great producers. Specifically, there is this wonderful, talented musician, Jedediah Alcock, based in the UK, and I've been working with him on a lot of tracks. And then, so we're going to have a lot more coming out soon.
Oh, that's great. I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear what you've got coming out. So how do you get an initial sketch of a song down? Do you just fire up your laptop and record a vocal, or do you do like a rhythm track, or do you play any instruments yourself? Like how does that all fit together?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of rough piano sketches for basic chords, but oftentimes when it's an idea that I have in my head, I'm just whipping out the voice notes. And I'm old school, so I need pen and paper. Otherwise, I can't really feel that it's real. So, for an initial melody, I'll use my phone. And then if I want to really sketch out a song, I'll write out pretty much a verse, chorus, bridge, whatever, and then I'll send it over to whoever I'm working with. They'll send it back, a bit of ping pong, and then eventually we'll get the final track. And in the studio, of course, like a lot of my music has vocal layering and harmonies, and I've been very lucky that my studio engineer is very, very, very skilled at suggesting the best harmonies to stack. So I think that's what kind of brings it all to life.
That's great. So it's like a group
Yeah.
effort and a little bit of a creative input from the engineering people and the producer. That's
Yeah.
how it works. That's how it fits all together and makes great
100%.
records.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
fantastic.
like a symbiotic process, I would say.
Sure. So
Yeah.
who are some of your favorite artists, and what are some of your favorite songs, I guess? And where do you get musical inspiration from besides the life stuff, the heavy stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Besides all that, obviously Steely Dan. I know I can talk a lot about that, but besides from Steely Dan, I would say kind of in that world, I don't know if this term is like a term that people look down upon in the Steely Dan community, but like yacht rock. I like that style and flavor of
Yeah.
music. So Pages is incredible. If you don't know Pages, check them out.
Mhm.
They were around that time period. Beard and Barnes is amazing. I love Hall and Oates, seen them many times. Jamiroquai, love, love, love Jamiroquai. That was probably the best concert I've ever been to before. And I listen to like a lot of like hip hop as well. I love Slum Village, Lupe Fiasco. There's just so many great artists out there, so it's kind of all over the place, I would say. What about you? What's your kind of like jam of the moment?
Jam of the moment. Well, believe it or not, let me pull up the playlist because I can never think of the name of the artist. Sorry, I'm looking around my camera
No
at the
worries. I'm
moment because I'm,
also
I'm
gonna like cheat and pull this up because I have the memory of a snail. Okay.
I'm trying a new camera setup today, and like I have my tripod in front of like half of my screen, so I can see you, but I can't see anything else. So I need
Oh,
to
I
kind of
got
like
you.
figure this out. Yeah, this is the third episode, and I'm still getting the tech nailed down. Um, so believe it or not, not believe it or not, but there's a song called "Kill a Shit Funk" by Black Caviar.
Oh, I've
Um,
heard of Black Caviar. How would you describe the music?
it's typical current hip hop, but it's just that song is just so catchy. It really got me. There's a song called Edamame by, I'm not sure how to say it. It's BBNO dollar sign with Rich Brian.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know
Yeah.
him.
It was on a show that I was watching, and I literally like rewound the show like 3 times to hear the song because I was like, oh, I like this. And then I finally just Shazammed it and was like, all right, put it on my playlist. Those are two. I got back into some older hip hop stuff recently. So I've been playing a
Hmm.
lot of Tribe Called Quest, a lot of
Love
Public
Tribe Called
Enemy.
Quest. Hmm.
Man, what else? Jam of the moment. Going to the yacht rock side of things. And by the way, the Steely Dan community can be a little bit snobbish and petty.
That's why, like, I was
Um,
honestly like excited to be on here with you, but I was like, they're gonna eat me alive. Like,
no, no, no. I won't let them. No, no hate here.
okay, cool, cool.
Look,
All
I
positive
consider
vibes.
yes, all good things. I consider Steely Dan to be yacht rock adjacent. I don't really
Okay.
find them to be yacht rock, but they're in that same camp. And I don't know if you've ever seen the yacht rock, like the web series. There's like 10 episodes on
I've
YouTube.
yeah, I've seen a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they kind of get lumped into that world, but they're sort of off on the side, I guess. And um,
Yeah, it's musically
it's
so complex. Like I know it's kind of like sacrilege to stack them up against. Like I don't want to, shit talk anyone, but like Toto and Sticks. But also, can I curse on here? I don't even know.
you can curse all you want.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. But yeah, I know they're very complex, and yeah, but I don't know. I feel like the first Steely Dan fan I met outside of my dad who introduced me to Steely Dan was definitely like the ultimate like Steely Dan slash generally snob. But I was introduced to so much from that person. I was like, wow, they have a right to feel this way about the music because it is just so rich and so complex. But yeah, no, it sounds like your playlist has some good jams on there.
Yeah, and I'll link that in the comments as well. I'll send you a copy offline so you can take a look.
Cool.
What I've been doing, and I was telling my guest last week the same thing, is I've been keeping like this sort of just holding tank, I call it, of a playlist. So
Hmm.
as I come across new songs, as I'm recommended things, as Spotify shows me new stuff, or whatever, I'll just drop it in there, listen to it, and then
I do the
eventually
same
the stuff.
thing.
Okay, and then the stuff that I like that I want to keep, I'll move into like a permanent playlist, and I just have a series of those. And every time it gets to like 200, 250 songs, I'll just start a new one so they don't get too unwieldy.
Cool.
So there's the most random ass playlists ever.
Yeah,
But
you have like Steely Dan, and then you have Britney Spears, and probably like a whole mix showing up in there at the gym, running fast. Yeah. No, it's good. I
totally.
feel like it's interesting too, like when you make a playlist within a short time span to see how it progresses, because I feel like you can kind of track like where you're at. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whatever the
Yeah.
vibe that you were going through in that time. Like, if you're going through like some angsty days and it's just like Stained, Nickelback, all this stuff, you can tell that this, January, whatever, 10th through 12th was a rough time. Yeah, I love playlists though. So I
Yeah, oh,
also
me too.
collect
I have.
CDs. So that's my
Oh,
big thing
nice.
is I'm like looking at my collection right now, and that's my bread and butter passion is I just collect a lot of CDs.
I still have my CD collection. It's tucked away, because I digitized everything and
Mm,
put everything into those zipper
yeah.
folders years ago and stuff. But yeah, I also used to collect, but I'm definitely a playlist hoarder. I've
Mm-hmm.
got maybe 120, 130 playlists on Spotify
Ooh.
since yeah. And same thing, like, I'll do kind of the point in time ones, like what I'm listening to currently. And then other times I'll sit and deliberately make a playlist based on a mood or,
Yeah.
an artist or, whatever. So yeah, lots of them. But it's
Yeah,
always fun to
no.
go back and look at the ones that you made, a year ago, 5 years ago, whatever, and be like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Or you ever get those like time capsules where they'll suggest to you like 3 years ago you were jamming out to the internet, and you're like, yeah, I was, and then it kind of brings them back in your rotation. And sometimes the music can have like a new meaning to you, or a new sound just based on time that's passed. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So the playlist that you sent me, and thank you, by the way, that was
Sure.
a
I went a
great
little
one.
overboard, honestly.
You can never go overboard on a playlist, as far as I'm
Okay,
concerned.
cool.
Um, a lot of good stuff on there. So Prefab Sprout, it's a bit
Yeah,
of an
prefab.
obscure band. So how do you know
Yeah.
them? And what are some other songs? I think you put "Looking for Atlantis" on the playlist. But what are some of your favorite
Yeah.
songs by them?
So I don't actually remember how I found them. Oh, probably. So, as a giant music nerd, and current music nerd, but back in high school, I would just spend hours on YouTube just getting in a rabbit hole, like suggested video after suggested video, Googling keywords, finding like just things that you would never normally find. And I think that's how I found them. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably more surface level fan. Like, I really love Cruel. Looking for Atlantis is just such a feel good jam. I love that one. Cruel, Looking for Atlantis, Appetite. I know I have, oh, All the World Loves Lovers. I
Oh
feel like
yeah.
that one is such a beautiful, beautiful track. Like, I don't know, are there a lot of covers of prefab songs? Like, I don't really know of any prefab covers by,
No, I haven't heard a
notable
lot actually.
artists. Yeah,
No.
which is kind of weird because I feel like their music, even though it's a bit off kilter, like it's generally pretty accessible, I would say, and poppy. But what about you? How did you find prefab, and what's your prefab jams?
Wow. So how did I find prefab? Set the time machine for 1990.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, a friend of mine, a couple friends of mine that were, I grew up in Atlantic City in South Jersey,
Okay.
and there were few people that had come in from Ireland for the summer and that I met and was friendly with. And the one guy, his name was Donal, and he was just like, he was so into all kinds of music and just turned me on to so many good bands. So, he would lend me cassettes of Prefab Sprout, The
Mm.
Laws.
The
I can't remember.
Laws.
Yeah. Do you know the song There She Goes?
Oh, no, maybe I don't. Oh yeah, of course. Wait,
Six.
that's yeah, yeah, yeah. Sixpence None the Rich. Is that? Yeah, of course I
Yep.
know that song. What a
That's the cover, right?
jeez.
So the Laws is the original
Oh,
version, and that
I'm
album,
putting
they
on
only had one
my
album. It was one of those brilliant bands that just came out with this masterpiece and then kind of just went away. Um,
interesting. I'm like
so
putting that down so I have that. Cool.
Yeah, for sure. I like the original better than the cover. I know a lot of people would disagree, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that was another band. But Prefab was one of the ones he turned me on to, and the first couple of albums. So he made me copies of their cassettes and stuff, and I just became
Yeah.
obsessed with them. And then I followed their new releases through the next few years, and then I think 2001, 2003 was maybe the last thing they put out. Um,
Okay.
my favorite Prefab Sprout song is hands down Bonnie off of
Mm,
Steve McQueen.
I feel like I've heard that one. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when did they're not still active, are they?
No, no.
No.
Patty McAloon has the
Oh,
guy who basically writes all the music, and he was the lead singer. He had some sort of vision problem, and
right.
he's basically almost blind, I think, and he's got some other
Uh,
stuff going on health wise. So I think he recorded kind of like a solo album, even though he put it out under the Prefab Sprout name, and it's called I Troll the Megahertz. And it's
hmm.
sort of just an atmospheric album, mostly instrumental. It's gorgeous. But that was the last thing he did, and that was, I think, early 2000s, maybe.
Oh wow. Okay. I always wonder when that happens when you have an artist and they've released a lot of stuff and then they just kind of taper off. Like do you know Remy Shand at all?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, so I had come across one of his tracks like a long time ago. He had only released one album, and incredible album. It was released through Motown. I want to say, can I cheat? I think it was like
Sure.
2003. Let me see. Remy Shan album. It was so good. Self 2002. I was close. So yeah, Canadian singer, really, really incredible. Rocksteady has just been on heavy rotation, and when you try to figure out what happened after that release, like there's nothing. There's no information as to where he went, why he disappeared. You'll get some like niche YouTube channels trying to uncover like where did Remy Shan go, but it's just always so bizarre when like I don't know when there's like a masterpiece, and I guess it's all too common. And that's part of why I love like, crate digging is because a lot of the stuff that I find is not digitized, and I get the the jackets and I get to read the stories and the credits, and then when you look it up it's like there's no trace, and it feels like this mystery I want to uncover, and it's like a little bittersweet.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a bittersweet, but it's so fun discovering something and feeling like you're part of the secret club of like, maybe
Yeah.
the 100 people in the world that have ever heard this album. And like you said, like sort of looking it up and trying to see if you can trace what happened or where the artist went. And a lot of times it's just a dead end, but it's like a detective hunt, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly, exactly. And sometimes they like evolve, like with Pages. I think they ended up turning into Mr. Mister, and I would have
Yep.
never guessed because like no hate on Mr. Mister fans, but I really don't like Mr. Mister. But I love Pages, and I'm like, why was that not more commercially successful than Mr. Mister? I guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
Um yeah, but there's some really great finds out there for sure.
So, what are some of your favorite? I know we said we talk about New York later, but I know you're in New York City, and
Yeah.
I'm there a few days a week for work, but I don't get to hang out in the cities nearly as much as I'd like to. But what are some good places to go? Like, where do you find records, and what are your favorite little hole in the wall record shops?
So it's really weird because I don't really like get my records as much here as I do, or my CDs as much as I do when I travel. Because I kind of like to tie getting CDs to wherever I visit. But I know I'm gonna butcher this. This is so embarrassing. But there's a store in the West Village, or yeah, it is the West Village. It's got a red awning. This is so embarrassing. I can't remember the name. I think it's like Village CDs and something or other. Academy Records is really cool as well. If you've been to Academy, um, I feel like the Strand isn't a cool answer, but sometimes I'll go to the Strand in Union Square, which, if you don't know what the Strand is, it's like a massive
Oh yeah.
bookstore. It is local, so support local. But yeah, that's where I'll get my CDs. And then honestly, like sometimes I'll just go into a thrift store. Like the other day, I was hanging out with my friend in Queens, and we were just curious. We hopped into, I think it was like a Goodwill or something. She was just like looking around, and there's some incredible CD finds. Like if you're willing to look through bins of potentially hazardous CD covers, you will potentially find like a great CD. So I'd say some of my stuff is from there as well. But I love, like, I was just in LA and I get a lot of CDs from Amoeba. Like, if you have you been to
Hmm.
Amoeba in LA?
No, but I've heard of them.
Yeah, Amoeba is like top tier. Like, it's just like the amount of inventory they have, and the staff is just so knowledgeable. So I love going to Amoeba, and yeah, I'd say like combo thrifting and all that stuff. So, do you collect records, or you just yeah?
I just started, so I'm old enough that I lived through the first vinyl era, and all of my
Mm-hmm.
early music was all on vinyl as a kid, and even into my tween years, I guess, and before everything became CDs.
Yeah.
But I have sort of been avoiding the vinyl thing just because I was like, what am I going to do? And I don't have a turntable. I don't even have a proper stereo system.
Yeah.
But then the bug kind of hit me, and some bands that I really love started to do reissues on vinyl that, things
Mm,
that probably hadn't been available and may not be available again. So I was like, okay, it's time.
yeah.
The first one that I purchased was there's a Dutch alternative band called Betty Serveert. I don't know if you're
Not have
familiar.
not heard of them. No.
I will have to link you up with some of their stuff or
Please.
throw it on
Yeah.
the playlist. Yeah, they're fabulous. They came out in the very early '90s, and I think they were on Sub Pop, so they were sort of in the same
Okay.
vein as like Pixies, Buffalo Tom, like that kind of circle of bands that were all from. It's weird, like all the other bands were kind of from the Boston area, but then they were from the Netherlands, and they just ended up coming over here and getting signed, and whatever.
Interesting. Oh.
So they re-released their first album on orange vinyl, and it came with a bonus 7-inch with like a remix or an alternate take of one of their songs. It's kind of bundled in. So I was like, all right, I have to get it. So I
Yeah.
did.
How was the bonus track? Was it everything you wanted and more? Or, like you
I
said, it
haven't
was
had
a
a chance
bonus
to
track?
hear it yet.
Oh my gosh, you got to play it after the show.
Yeah. Well, I
That's
need to
super
get the
cool.
turntable going. That's the problem. Is
That's the
I
number
don't.
one thing is I guess you can't play without the
Yes.
turntable.
So
Yeah.
that's gonna come soon.
Yeah.
And yeah,
How are
now
you
that I
with
have some
equipment?
vinyl.
With finding equipment, like are you very specific? Like how do you decide what is going to be the best console for you and the best equipment?
Um, Great question. There's a couple of YouTube channels that I've been watching. There's, I think the one guy's channel is called Cheap Audio Man.
Cheap audio man. Okay.
Yeah, and he goes through all the different components and speakers and turntables and all the amplifiers and stuff, and just sort of
Yeah.
and he does these great videos where it's like, okay, best system under $500, best system under $1,000 kind of thing, and he'll go
Okay.
through and tell you the pros and cons of all these different things. So I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. I'm probably just going to build an inexpensive, separate stack, like just a
Yeah.
small amp and a DAC, and I want to spend more money on the turntable and the speakers. I think that's where you get the most bang for the buck in terms of sound quality.
Yeah.
I just have
Definitely.
to, like I said, I was just sort of figuring out my setup for today again. And,
No, it looks
I've gone
great.
back
I
and
mean,
forth. Oh,
you know, yeah, I feel
well,
like
thanks.
it's you find it like I don't know in an apartment in New York City. I was just like, huh, huh. Like it's very hard to find like space that makes sense. Like it is not living super big out here, so
Right.
limited space. Yeah, yeah,
No, I hear that. So yeah, I just have to rearrange my office slash, now podcast studio a little bit and,
yeah.
and make room for the audio stuff. I'll do that pretty soon. So then I picked up, there's another band from the 90s that I love called Marvelous 3.
That sounds very familiar, but I don't know a specific song from them.
They
What would
had
you describe
one
them as?
huge hit, I think it was 97 or 98 or 99 even, and it was called Freak of the Week. So another one you should check
Okay.
out.
Yeah,
It's
I've got
Bush
some homework.
Walker.
Yeah.
Do
Butch
you know
Walker.
Bush Walker at all?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
It was basically his band. It's a trio, and Butch went on to have a solo career, and he just became like this really sought after producer. He worked with like Avril Lavigne.
Oh,
Um, I can't think of the other couple bands that he worked with, but he did a lot of sort of behind the scenes production over the years. But Marvelous 3 finally got back together after like a
ooh.
20 something year hiatus, and they put a new album out, and it's just great. So I ordered the reissue of the first album or the second. It's really their second album, but it was their first commercial release,
Oh,
really. And then I got the new album on vinyl as
oh,
well. And then,
nice.
of course, when the Steely Dan stuff started coming out again last year,
Yeah,
I got Asia and Gaucho, and I got the Northeast Corridor album because it was on sale for like $15 or something. So I was like, sure, I'll pick that up too.
that's so cool. I was debating like wearing my Asia sweatshirt, which I got most recently on the Steely and Eagles tour, but it would have looked too. They didn't have the right sizes. I only was left with a large, so but it's very comfy. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Where did you
it's a
see
good one.
them?
Well, I've seen Steely Dan probably not like as many times as I'd like, but I think it's been like three times. I saw them, or maybe four times. I think twice at the Beacon, which is pretty close to where I am, and it's a pretty good venue, I'd say. I saw them once in like God, I can't remember the name of the town, but I do remember like having to take like some kind of transit up there. It was like upstate New York, very tiny theater, like very, very small theater. This was maybe like 2 years back. And gosh, wow, my memory is like so bad, but it was,
I know where you're talking about. I can't
you know
think of
what
the
I
name,
mean,
but
right? And
yeah,
they,
I know where it
yeah.
is. Yeah.
And the opener I had seen rather recently at Blue Note, whose name I cannot remember as well, but it was like a pianist, and it was very nice. And most recently, I saw them on the tour with the Eagles, which honestly was a little disheartening. Not because of did you go to that show? The
No.
Yeah, it wasn't, of course, because of Steely Dan, but it was because first off, I'm like, why are they opening? I'm like, it made me sad that they were not headlining, and I was like putting myself in like Donald Fagen shoes, and I was like, what must he be feeling, and all this stuff, and then I don't know, the crowd, nobody was standing up. Like I was just me. It was me and like one guy with a hot dog, a couple rows next to me, just like up there, just like jamming. And yeah, and it was a dead crowd, and I kept turning around, and it was a weird feeling. I mean, I guess you don't need a big crowd to appreciate and bring to life a concert, but it was just probably like my least favorite Steely Dan concert. And the Eagles are great too. I'm not a big Eagles fan, but I appreciated that as well. Like I didn't go for the Eagles. I went for Steely Dan.
Yeah, sure. And I get it. I mean, I think a lot of Steely Dan's fans are just getting old. So
Yeah,
I feel
it's
like
fair.
they want to sit down for the couple hours and not get up and dance and stuff. So I kind of
Yeah.
get it. But yeah, I got the same review from a few other people that went to the Eagle
Yeah.
stuff and just said it was fine. They played the hits for 45 minutes or whatever, and it was just kind of low energy, but it was still good. It was
Yeah.
still Steely Dan, right?
Yeah, it was
So
still them. It was just, yeah, I don't know. It's also, this is kind of weird to say because I'm sure they had the same, rigging set up as the Eagles, but just the way that the sound was translating to me it didn't sound as good as, for example, in the Beacon. It was just kind of like, I don't want to say tinny, but everything did feel very like, I don't know how to describe it. Like it just didn't sound as present as I would have liked it to have been, which is no fault of Steely Dan's own. But yeah, I'm hoping they'll come back again. Like it seems like they'll never stop touring. Do you think they'll ever throw in the towel or?
I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of a health scare from Donald Fagen a couple months ago, but I think he's fine now. They said he was in the hospital for some unspecified illness, but I guess
Mm,
he's okay, and he's back on the road. But I
yeah,
really hope he has at least one more full Steely Dan tour in him
yeah,
because I chose not to go see him with the Eagles. Kind of kicking myself. I really wish I did now, but I'm a little bit of a music snob. I'm not a big live music person because, part of the reason that you mentioned, like sometimes the sound quality is not just great. And
yeah.
I would have really wanted to have really good seats if I was going to go see them. And as you know, they were like super expensive. I mean,
They were
nosebleeds
so.
were
I
like
mean, like,
300
yeah,
bucks.
it cost like an arm and a leg, but I was down pretty close without my arm and leg just to see them. But it was expensive. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. So I just, and did you see him at the Garden? Is that where you went?
yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
did.
yeah, yeah. The sound in the Garden. I mean, I've
It's
been there a
not
bunch of
great.
times, and
Who
it's
have you
never
seen at the
great.
garden? Who have you seen there?
I saw Billy Joel there a few times.
Yeah, I saw him once.
Yeah, and as fantastic as he is, and as great as his band is, the sound quality just wasn't fabulous.
Yeah,
It was pretty good. So there's that. But yeah, I really hope that they come around Steely Dan and do one more tour with just them. And
yeah.
I never got to see them live I've never seen them live, period. But
When
I'm
Walter
really
was there,
sad that I didn't
yeah.
get to go when Walter was still alive. So I feel like it's just not the same.
Did you ever get, I guess, from like fellow, I assume you have like a Steely Dan friendship fan community, but
Yes.
of your friends who've seen them when Walter was alive, did and have seen them now, what are the like? How do they describe the performance was different? I mean, was it? I mean, what was the biggest takeaway from them? Would you
I
say?
think it's Walter's presence. He used to
Yeah.
just be more. Fagan doesn't really talk to the crowd. He'll do a little bit of patter in between songs here and there, but Walter would be the one introducing the band, and he would just do like this sort of they called them the Hey 19 raps, right? So during the bridge section in Hey 19, he would just sort of go off on these spoken tangents for like 5-10 minutes, and they were hilarious a lot of times, and sometimes they were just completely out in the middle of the field, but still funny, and still
Yeah.
great. So I think it was just he brought maybe a little more of the showmanship, and I think he was always the more outspoken or stage presence one,
Hmm.
in the band in the later years. So I think that's the big difference.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Because I guess I need to do a little more research. Like I have the songs that I'm very passionate about, but when I look at the history, like there's clearly a very storied history with them. And I guess I didn't know too much about Walter, and because I guess my experience of having seen them live and having really got into them was mostly focused on Donald Fagen. But yeah, it seems like they were two peas in a pod. So
Oh yeah, they said
yeah.
that they were like one brain. I mean, they just literally had like almost like an unspoken language between the two of them, and they would just
Yeah.
crack each other up, and nobody else would know what they were talking about. That sort of thing. So
Right,
that's kind
right.
of funny.
No,
So,
that's
what are the
awesome.
Steely Dan songs that you're passionate about? Since you mentioned that.
Well, my favorite is I love Deacon Blues. I think it's just such an epic song. Like it's just so beautiful. The sax solo. I guess unless there's some kind of like secret Bible that describes what every Steely Dan song means, like I don't truly know the deepest meaning of all of these songs, but I feel like every time I listen, like it's like a roller coaster. I'm just going through the different melodic intervals and taking away different things. Love that one. I really love Glamour Profession. It feels kind of like I'm in a Pink Panther movie. Does that make sense? Like
Yes,
I'll walk
yes,
down the street
absolutely.
sometimes and I'm just like, oh yeah, like it really does feel like you're like the lead in like a 1960s like sleuth film. I love that. Man, I'm on the spot. I love Asia, of course. Peg is really good. Honestly, yeah, man. Hey 19's really good. Dirty Work. Wow, there's just so many. And then like I actually love, and I'm curious to see like what kind of scoop, because I feel like I'm treating this also as like a learning process since you know so much about Steely Dan. Their album that had the Fez and Don't Take Me Alive, to me that sounds very like a bit of a shift towards more of like a rock centric, like hard rock centric album. Like, what's the backstory behind why that album kind of lends more towards that? I don't want to use the term grungy, but like more rock oriented sound.
Yeah, it was kind of like their guitar album, right? I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of guitar heavy songs. I mean, I think the funny thing is they started out as sort of a rock band, like they were sort of a tighter unit. They had, band members, right? So it was Skunk Baxter on guitar, it was Denny Diaz on guitar, it was Jim Hodder on drums, and they were like any other band. It was a five piece, and they all sort of had,
Mm.
I think Donald and Walter wrote all the songs and sort of dictated how things went in terms of arrangements and things in the studio. But I think the other guys had more input. But they played as a band, and in the early days they were actually playing out live a lot.
Mm.
They were touring, and they had sort of that rock band aesthetic,
Yeah.
and that rock band ethic, if you will. But then I think they realized over time that, some of the songs they wanted to do were a little bit more complex and just needed sort of specialist attention, right? So they started bringing in studio musicians to do solos and play, extra parts. And, Walter and Donald is fantastic musicians as they both are in terms of playing instruments. They were very like, well, I can't play as well as so and so. So if he can play this part better than I can, then why not let him do it, right? I don't care if I
Yeah.
don't play on my own record, right? Which is kind of funny. Um, so they kind of started going in this direction of using studio guys, right? So all the way
Yeah.
through the first two albums, it was the band. Pretzel Logic, they started to bring in some outside people. They largely replaced Jim Hodder on drums with Jim Gordon, who was a well-known studio ace. And then going into Katie Lie, they really started to lean harder on the jazz stuff, and it was a little more atmospheric and less
Yeah.
rock
I
focused.
didn't
And
really click with
nobody
Katie Lied as much, just
really,
throwing that out. I don't know why. Yeah, I have that CD, but it was not my, yeah,
a
favorite.
lot of people have a hard time with that album, I think, in terms of, it just doesn't connect for them for some reason. It's funny, that was one of the first albums that I fell in love with the album of
Really?
Steely Dan. Yeah.
Wow.
And I still love it. It's still one of my favorites.
I'll have to revisit it, I guess. I mean, do you like it as a cohesive album, or are there just tracks on there that stand out more to you than?
I like it as a cohesive album. I think Doctor Wu is one of my favorite Steely Dan
Hmm.
songs ever. Again, epic, fantastic sax solo, and it just tells a great story.
Hmm.
Um, Probably about drugs. I mean, definitely
Yeah.
about drugs, like so
Yeah.
many of their songs. And then, after that, I think, they kind of got lukewarm reception from the music critics and the press and everything else. And then I think they just said, all right, well, let's just try something different. So by the time Royal Scam came around, it
Hmm.
feels like, they just sort of went off in a different direction. So they brought in, it was the first, not, I don't know, was it the first time they used Chuck Rainey on bass, but I'm pretty sure that was the first Bernard Purdy session. So you've got these two fantastic R&B musicians that played on everything in the 60s and 70s, right? And they brought them in to do a lot of the rhythm section work. So you get this just top-notch groove in so many of these songs on Royal Scam. You get Larry Carlton coming in and playing guitar on "Don't Take Me Alive" and Kid Charlemagne. So,
Mm.
and he was a jazz guy, but he definitely has a harder edge on this album. So it's like they started to blend that jazz. I don't want to say fusion because I think they
Yeah,
hated that
that's
term, and I don't
just
like it
currently
either.
in an
But
elevator. Yeah, no.
right, exactly. But I think that's where this whole thing kind of started, and it's just a dark album. I mean, like all the
Yeah.
different songs, and I mean, I keep saying that about a lot of Steely Dan albums. I was just talking about Gaucho, a couple of days ago, and telling somebody it's like it's their darkest album. But Royal Scam's right up there, and I think
Yeah, that
it
feels
was.
super super dark to me.
Yeah, well, it was post Vietnam, right? It was
Mhm.
the mid to late '70s were coming in. It came out, I think, '76, right? So I think they were just very disillusioned with the world and with
Mm.
America and the American dream and all that. So I think those songs really kind of paint that picture.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I definitely need to dig into more of the tracks on that album because I feel like I primarily will listen to The Fez and Don't Take Me Alive, but yeah, it does feel notably heavier than their others. So yeah. And then what's like an underrated Dan album you would recommend to someone who needs to further dig into their work?
Oh wow, I think Gaucho gets a lot of unnecessary hate, and I think the reason why is because it's so different from
Glamour
what
Profession's on
came
Gaucho,
before it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Why yeah, why and Babylon Sisters I think as well. Why don't people like that album?
I think it's because Walter was not maybe as involved as he had been, and it was recorded under a lot of stressful conditions,
Mm.
and people find it to be sterile. Where Asia is just this spacious,
Mm.
gorgeous, ethereal album all the way
Mm-hmm.
through. Gaucho went into this like sort of bubble, right, of its own, and I think the production's a little bit different. Everything's super tight, super clean. They
Would
use
you say
Wendell,
it's
the drum
poppier
machine.
almost? Like a little it's a little poppy in a way, right?
Yeah, I
Like
think so. I
a
mean,
little
Hey
bit?
19 is, one of my least favorite Steely Dan songs, and only because I've heard it so many times, and
Yeah, yeah,
because,
you're the supermarket. Yeah. For me that's like Ricky don't lose or sorry. Yeah, why am I my brain is like but you know what I mean. Yeah,
yeah,
there are definitely
gotcha.
songs where you're like, yeah, I can't do this because it plays so regularly or commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was poppy, and I think, songs like Glamour Profession and Time Out of
Yeah.
Mind, like they're
Time Out of
so
Mind is so
peppy and,
good. Yeah.
oh, it's
Oh, I
so
like
good.
that one a lot.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I mean, like a lot of people, the bridge in that song is just one of my favorite pieces of music ever written. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Their middle eight sections or their bridges because they go so much longer than 8 bars a lot of times. Could be songs like in and of themselves. Some of them like they just go off on
Mhm.
these like musical tangents that kind of like could be their own piece of music. It's so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people just don't like Gaucho because it just doesn't really sound like all the other Steely Dan stuff that came right before it. But I love
Hmm.
it. It's one of my favorite albums by them.
Yeah. I also love the cover art of that album as well. I'm a big like cover art fan and
Mm-hmm.
design fan, and it's just yeah, I think it's a really really pretty cover as well.
Yeah, it's great. I would love to go see it's from a painting that's somewhere on a wall in like a
Oh,
courtyard or something in Argentina. Yeah,
oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Okay. Huh. Yeah. No, it's really quite nice.
yeah, it's
So
great.
yeah, definitely. I guess with are there any like albums where you just like where you personally or like I do not like this album. I don't I would not like just throw it out of the discography, just throw it away.
Well, if I had to throw out one, it would be Two Against Nature. I'm going to get a lot of hate from the Steely Danners for saying that. I'm a ride or die when it comes to a lot of bands, but with other bands, there are albums that I just don't like and I won't listen to that much. And maybe there's one or
Yeah.
two good songs on it, and I just sort of discount the rest. And Steely Dan's discography is so small, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there's the 7 original albums, there's the 2 reunion albums, and that's it. And
Yeah.
there's never going to be another Steely Dan album, obviously. So like that's all we have to work with. So I try to give the 2 albums that came out after the reunion a lot more love than I used to, but I still just don't intentionally put them on to listen to sometimes. Like I'll have to make myself listen to some of the songs
Yeah.
on there.
To be able to yeah, get through them. Got it. Yeah. Sorry, one sec.
Sure.
Sorry, I think I mentioned at the start, I'm like feeling a little like sick, but I'm okay.
All right, as long as you're okay to keep going.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Okay. So yeah, the other Steely Dan song that I would recommend, since you started to dip your toe into Royal Scam, is I
Yeah.
think one of my favorite Steely Dan songs, and those change like every week. But right now is Green Earrings.
Yeah, Green.
Just
Yeah, Green Earrings.
yeah,
I've delved into some of the tracks. Yeah, or Green
good.
Earrings is a song. Jesus is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's one of the songs on Royal Scam. Yeah.
yeah. I'm like cheating right now. This is probably the most embarrassing Steely Dan interview ever.
Not at all.
This is like the amateur hour version here because okay, I'm on. Yeah. Okay. Yes. The one I really don't know on here is Everything You Did. Don't know that. Sign in Stranger. Don't know. You know, Kid Charlemagne and Don't Take Me Live. Fez. Have Heard Green Earrings. Haitian Divorce. Yes. And Royal Scam.
Sign In Stranger and Everything You Did, definitely cue those up next because
Okay.
fantastic
Cool.
song. Sign In Stranger is just another great song. The piano playing on that, it's Paul Griffin. He's fantastic, and Everything You Did is just I love that. Just as many people do for the line, "Turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening." Which apparently was, Walter wrote that because I guess, they were having an argument and his girlfriend was playing the Eagles and, yeah, pretty funny.
Huh. Yeah, a lot of gems.
Right.
And to people with the lyrics, because they're so complex, I've gone online and I feel like I've found like a wiki where people try to kind of dissect what the lyrics mean. Do you feel like Steely Dan songs have definitive meanings that they wrote with a specific intention in mind, or do you feel like they're kind of ambiguous and can mean different things?
I think it's a blend of both. I think there were definitely songs that were written for specific situations or, with specific events or incidents. But I think there's a lot that's just really, they wrote the words to kind of fit the music, right? I feel like they always started with the music first and sort of added lyrics later. Plus, a lot of times from reading interviews with the two of them from over the years, they said that a lot of times, Donald would come in with lyrics half written and Walter would finish them, or Walter would have a line but Donald would suggest a different word for the last word of the line and they would change it, right? So I feel like there's so much collaborative stuff going on that it wasn't just one person's point of view all the time. But if you listen to them talk about trying to uncover the meanings, they give you nothing. Like a lot of times they'll just say like it's up to the listener. It's like we don't want to tell you what to think. Like make your own conclusions from what you hear.
Yeah, got it. No, that's positive though, because I feel like there are artists who specifically want their vision of whatever the music was written as originally to be translated to the listeners, and I think sometimes like they don't give listeners freedom, but that's cool that they're open to letting people interpret the work in their own ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, anything else you wanted to cover? I know we're getting to about 48 minutes, and I like to keep these under an hour. But if there's any other topic, we can definitely keep.
Yeah, I'm sorry for just being a little off kilter today. I was a bit sick and think I did not prepare well enough. But I appreciate having spoken with you. I feel so bad. No, I feel like this has inspired me to dig deeper into the Dan, and also just like music from that time period in general. I need to check out those songs that you mentioned on that playlist. So please send them my way, the different bands.
I will.
Yeah. Otherwise, no, I'm grateful for being on the podcast, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, and you've been great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Carly. And just hang on for a second. I'm going to stop recording, but then I just need you to hang on for 2 seconds after.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.